Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange Podcast. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence, to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's podcast. Greetings, everyone. This is Hugh Ballou back for another episode of the Nonprofit Exchange. We have guests each week. Some are working with nonprofits. Some are experts in different fields. Some are in the trenches leading nonprofit initiatives and have stories to tell about their work. Today, we have a longtime friend and colleague, Lynn Sanders, who's an expert, among many things, with language. And the theme of what she's going to share with you today is creating your story, because your story is the important part of connecting with others who really want to help you. So we need to help them know how to help you. So there's lots of reasons to have a good story, and we know that you're creating lots of value already. So let's talk to Lynn about how we're going to let people know about that value. And Lynn is a multiple award-winning author and a book creator, and she helps nonprofit leaders and business leaders create their story. So what we're talking about today, Lynn, our topic is creating your story, raising awareness, and attracting support. But before we talk about that, I want people to know, who's Lynn Sanders. So give us a little bit of background about you, and then tell us, why are you doing this work? What is your passion?
Terrific. Thank you, Hugh, and thank you all for listening. As Hugh mentioned, I call myself the story guide because I've learned how to help people create their story from start to finish so they can get results, whether that be in more support financially or in volunteers or even just raising awareness and getting more followers online. My story actually begins with learning to value myself and helping others value themselves. And I can go into a little bit of that right now, Hugh, or just go into my credentials, whichever you'd prefer.
Just talk about you, and then we'll dig into some of that stuff.
Okay,
However
so
you want.
just as far as my credentials, I'd say my credentials professionally as a storyteller begins in at a commercial music company where I was asked to write live trade shows for Fortune 500 companies, coming up with a positioning statement, a marketing focus for every show that would entice and capture people's interest while they're walking by at a trade show. So I wrote for Johnson Johnson, Keebler, Reynolds Aluminum, Haynes, and I came up with a positioning statement that marketed their products and services and kept people watching a live, entertaining, interactive show and got them interested in the company's products. From there, I also went on and wrote commercials for radio and TV. My claim to fame was the WGN TV Lyrics, Chicago's very own Channel 9, that ran for a long time with the famous star Lou Rawls singing. And then from there, I went and became my own freelance writer. I had my own company, Park Avenue Productions, which morphed into Park Avenue Marketing and eventually Difference Makers Media. And I help clients, both corporate clients, nonprofits, and business entrepreneurs in telling their story, whether it be for brochures, articles, videos, even speeches, newsletters, all types of writing. And I won awards along the way. And I also, I think, helped nonprofits and corporate, business owners recognize their value, because many times I found that people didn't realize how important their story was in engaging with audiences and getting people to recognize how unique and special that company was so that they want to do business with them. And one of my favorite accomplishments was for a nonprofit in on the west side of Chicago, where they were having a fundraiser on Mother's Day, and I was asked to create a video for them in 3 days because they only had a little bit of time, and I was able to do that with 1 day of writing, 1 day of shooting the video, 1 day of editing, and it became very, very successful in helping them raise lots of money. And ultimately, they got a $100,000 award from our mayor for a story that I got published in the Sunday Chicago Tribune.
Wow. Wow. So we created a web page for this interview. You can go to the Nonprofit Exchange and click on the Difference Makers Media episode, which is today's date. And you can find multiple episodes on the Nonprofit Exchange and the podcast, wherever you get podcasts with the same name, the Nonprofit Exchange. And Lynn Sanders is a colleague. We've actually worked with some of the same nonprofits, and they brag about how you've helped them um, get a grip on what was in their head and be able to put it on paper. And that, sometimes we're so close to it, it's really hard to define what we're doing. And so it helps to have an external advisor, sounding board, like expert like yourself. And even as we were, I thank Lynn for coming in the last minute. We've talked about you being on the show, but we hadn't put it on the calendar. And I called you yesterday, said I had a cancellation, and you graciously said, "Oh, I can do this." So I know a lot about your work. I don't know everything about your work, but I do know that you, and I put it on the website. You won 2017 Conservation Author of the Year for
Right.
raising environmental awareness with your book. Is that Dancing with Tex?
Right, that is Dancing with Tex, the remarkable friendship to save the whooping cranes.
Now
It's a
that's a children's book. Is that
right.
so? You think
It,
adults can learn from a children's book?
oh, definitely. We all can. That book was a hidden story that was told to me off camera. I was the video co-producer and scriptwriter on a video that Amico was producing at the International Crane Foundation. And it's not a truck company, it's not those kind of cranes. It's the world's only sanctuary for all 15 species of cranes. They're endangered species. And so Amico wanted to share with their international marketing managers how they were doing good in the world and donating to this organization. So I was interviewing Amico executives and the co-founder, George Archibald, about his organization. And then off camera, George told me this story that I just at first couldn't believe. And he said, years ago, I was friends with this bird, a rare whooping crane, and we danced together. So I said, sure, right, right. But he sounded so earnest that I realized he must be telling me the truth. He said, this bird's brain was imprinted on a zookeeper. And that means she thought that she was a person because she was raised by a zookeeper. And as a result, she didn't want to hang around any other birds, just people. And so George realized that if she identified with people, perhaps she would allow him to be her dance partner, because all cranes do a mating dance before they lay eggs. So he brought this bird named Tex over to his sanctuary, and he ended up dancing with her on and off for a period of 6 years, until finally Tex laid a fertile egg with the help of scientists, of course, giving her, I call them special shots. And then that little chick ended up having more chicks and more chicks, so that one friendship ended up helping save the whooping cranes from extinction. And I thought it was such an amazing story that, and most people didn't know about it, that I thought that deserves to be in a children's book, because more children need to be inspired and empowered that they make a difference too.
And you have another one too. We'll talk about in a minute. But so storytelling, and we've had people. I spent a couple of years talk about writing a story and being able to communicate effectively. And in 32 years of working with nonprofits, one topic always comes up as a problem, always comes up, and it's communications. Mostly internal, but external. They don't know we exist in the world, probably because we don't tell them, and probably because so we're busy doing, we don't spend time writing about it. And when we do, we're not doing very good. So why is storytelling so important in defining the impact of your organization and building impact with your network?
That's such a good question, Hugh. You're right. Most people are busy doing the work and not going out and sharing what they do. So when you tell a story, you connect with people from the heart, not the head. People are not going to remember your credentials. You may not remember that I, wrote the lyrics for WGN TV, but you would remember perhaps a story about George and Tex. So because storytelling connects us from the heart, it also makes you more memorable. It builds trust and credibility because really there's no one like you. And because there's no one like you and you're unique, your story will make you stand out in the marketplace. There's lots of nonprofits out there, but what do you do that's unique? That's what people want to find out about, and that's what they'll remember.
Absolutely. That's well stated. Now, your website is differencemakersmedia.com. Differencemakersmedia.com. I love the title. You know, we're in the business of making a difference in nonprofit. You're in a business of helping leaders make a difference by telling people what they're actually doing. We just kind of keep it a secret, not by intent, and it's hard to think. We can all write, but it's hard to think that we need somebody to help us with it. But we do. We really need to get outside of our brain and have somebody else help us think through the issues. So, do you have an example of a story that you helped somebody create and what impact that it's helped provide for that organization?
Yes, I have many stories. I'm going to just share one or two with you. I happen to really love making a story come alive, whether it's through a book or a video or an article, because I feel that it gives an impression that lives on. And I want to just add one more thing before I read this story to you. Most of us are not aware that we are living beyond the physical realm. And I'm a spiritual person, but I want you to realize that we all have a vibration. That's what makes our soul alive. And every word and every thought, every action we do carries that vibration. So when you put words together that are powerful and inspirational, empowering, you are touching people at the soul level. And therefore you're getting them more interested in you and bringing them to take action. So I'm very aware of the words I use. And there's even online, there's a site where you can go to that will measure your SEO, your search engine optimization of your titles, because certain words will draw more people to you. So I'm going to just share with you a little bit of a story that I wrote in a children's book called Social Justice, How You Can Make a Difference. This was published by Capstone Press. I don't own the book. I basically gave away the rights. I just wrote the book. But it's a great book because it not only helps children learn how to create their own nonprofit, but it shares different stories of youth who have created their own nonprofits to make a difference. And I don't think there's any other book quite like this. So I'm going to read, I did a lot of research. I'm going to read one of the opening part of a story about a 12-year-old boy who's now an adult and going on to continue making a big difference in the world. As 12-year-old Craig Kielberger reached for the newspaper comics, he had no idea his life was about to change. Instead of the comics, Craig's eyes fell on the picture of 12-year-old Iqbal Masih. At the age of 4, Iqbal had been sold into slavery in Pakistan. He was forced to work 12 hours a day, tying small knots in carpets at a factory. Iqbal could not go out to play or go to school. If the child workers even spoke to each other, the guards would hit them. The children would be beaten or hung upside down if they became sick or talked back. When Iqbal was 10, he escaped and began telling people about child slavery. But leaders in the carpet industry didn't like him telling people about the secret. As he became well known, Iqbal started to receive death threats. But he refused to stop spreading his message. At the age of 12, Iqbal was killed. No one is sure who shot Iqbal. Many people believe the leaders of the carpet industry had him killed because he spoke out. Craig realized Iqbal's life was very different from his own, but they were the same age. Craig wondered how many other kids were forced to live like Iqbal, and he wondered if a boy in Canada could do anything to help other kids halfway around the world. And I'll stop right there. There's one more page, but basically Craig, as a 12-year-old, went to his school, got his teachers, the principal, and other students interested to go and make a difference, and he created a nonprofit called Free the Children that's still going strong. And I went through more details, but it just shows you age has nothing to do with it. It really comes down to your dream. What do you want to do to make a difference? And how dedicated are you and persevering to make it happen?
There's a couple of folks watching on the webinar here that we'll let them ask questions in a few minutes, but they work with youth initiatives. Legacy International and Philanthropy Kids. So we'll let them, I'm sure they're pleased to hear your passion for equipping, empowering our younger generations, because people like to say, oh, it's the future of our country. Well, it's the current, the current leadership of our country, if we give them a chance. One time I taught middle school and sixth graders, I had to do a whole version of a musical called Godspell. And people said, well, how did you do that? It's hard. And I said, well, I never told them it was hard. And they just kind of rose to the musical level. And so what are, I want to point out before I forget here, differencemakersmedia.com. If you go there, there's under your lovely picture, there's a big red stripe. And it says, get your strategic story guide, tips, special offers, and more. So that's generous of you. Anybody can go there. So Difference Makers Media. Now they'll be on your list and they can get off if they want, but they can hear from you about special things that you offer and special events. And I know Lynn is a person that delivers lots of value. So Legacy Internet, just a Rash put his link in there, which I will share with you later. But what are two of the important elements that your story needs, like vulnerability, credibility? What are some of the important things that stories need, the different components?
Well, first you mentioned the two elements right there. I was putting that as a little hint. So every good story needs vulnerability. And that means you have to be willing to be open and honest about who you are, and people will sense that. When you're vulnerable, then people are actually more willing to be vulnerable with you. They want to connect with you because they see you're so open. And credibility is the breakthrough part of your story. It's your credibility is the success that you've achieved for other people, so they can believe that you'll be successful for them. We're selling an intangible if you think about it. Selling making a difference means someone has to believe that you have made a difference for others and you will make a difference for them. And when people donate to nonprofits, they have to feel that their money is going towards a good cause and you are making a difference. In fact, I changed my company name, as I mentioned earlier, from Park Avenue Productions, where I used to be on Park Avenue, and I felt like it was a glamorous sounding name, and it was, but it ended up feeling like it wasn't the right fit for me because of my story, which I'm happy to share with you. And that's when I decided I needed to change my title, my name, to Difference Makers Media, because I want to help difference makers, visionary leaders, especially nonprofits or business entrepreneurs, make a bigger difference through their story. And most people never realize how powerful your story can be in changing lives.
Wow. So you're a story guide. So you help people craft their stories. Is that right?
That is correct. And I'd love to share a little bit of my story. What I found is really challenging is, how do you condense your story to make it really impactful in a short way? Because I'm sure many of you, if you're asked to tell your story, 9 times out of 10, people will start with their credentials and you don't remember the facts. You remember the story, the beginning, middle, and ending. So I want to give you 4 different points to remember in crafting your story right now. And this is in my free story strategy guide. So I certainly recommend getting it, and you'll learn from that. I'm going to give you the 4 components first, and then I'm going to fill in with my story so you can identify how it all fits together like a puzzle. So the first part of your story, the journey of who you became, starts with a call to action. That's your trigger. From that first component, we're going to go into the pit. And the pit is the worst thing that happened, but also became the turning point, the pivot that set you into a search. So we've got call, the pit, the search, and that search is your search for meaning after you've gone through a very, very negative experience. And ultimately that search leads to the breakthrough. Those are the 4 parts. So when you tell your story, I'm going to give you one more tip. You want to speak in the present tense. I know Hugh always says the people, but you do that with your story because your story is who you are. That's your story is everything. It's not how many boxes you have in the closet or, how many numbers you've made in this month. So my story starts at age 11 when my mother tells me that it's not important for girls to have a bat mitzvah, it's more important for boys. She didn't mean anything by it, but that meant a lot to me and I didn't even realize it at the time. I was only 11, but a bat mitzvah represents a passage of time from being a child to an adult and taking on the adult responsibilities of healing the world and doing good in the world. So those words created a different story in my mind that I wasn't good enough because it wasn't important enough for girls to have a bat mitzvah. So I set on a path that I had to prove myself. I had to become an overachiever to show that I was good enough, and I excelled both at school and at work. And ultimately, as you heard a moment ago, I went from being at a commercial music company to having my own business. And then suddenly I got a call no one would probably ever want to get it. 11:30 at night, my brother says, Mom had a heart attack and it doesn't look good. And then 30 minutes later, a second call came and he said, she's gone. And I have to tell you, I get the goosebumps right now. I felt like my own heart was being pulled out, and I felt like I was literally falling into a bottomless pit where I could not find my way out. My mother had always been my best friend, my foundation, the dearest love of my life. And even though I'm married and have two wonderful boys, my mom was always a very important part of my life. So I went from being, happy in what I did and writing all kinds of work to literally feeling like I couldn't go on. And I also learned that your emotional mental state affects the physical. And because of being so grief stricken, my back gave out. I had 3 slip discs. I could barely walk. And I didn't really know if I wanted to keep on living. It's that bad. So I researched all different healers. I found an energy healer. And that man said, I think I can help you heal. And actually, over a period of months, he did. My disc went back into alignment. And he asked me an important question, which is, do you want to live? And I, at the time, said, well, I think so. I wasn't sure. And he said, how would your mother want you to live? And then I realized it would be important for me to live fully, not just kind of go through life and being down all the time. So I decided I was going to make a difference. And I started doing all kinds of work with nonprofits and helping them get 6-figure donations, doubling their memberships through videos and writing and articles and publicity, and feeling really good about myself. But part of the time I still was feeling like there was a lack. I actually went and had an adult B'nai Mitzvah to claim my value, that I was good enough to have the service. And ultimately, I felt I was given a test. And I had just finished creating a patient safety video called Things You Should Know Before Entering the Hospital, which won a national award. And the essence of that video was that if you are feeling ill, you need to have an advocate by your side in a hospital because you don't think clearly when you're sick. Well, shortly after I created that video, I myself got ill. I was misdiagnosed at a hospital. I was at an airport the next day planning to fly from Denver to Chicago in extreme pain. And all I could remember was take the little white pills. That's what they told me at the emergency room. I didn't remember that they said, if you don't feel better, come back. And I was planning to board a plane from Denver to Chicago in extreme pain. And I felt like I got help from the other side because the flight was canceled 3 times at the gate. And by that time, I knew I couldn't board. And I just called out to my husband, I can't make it. And I was rushed by ambulance to the hospital and found out I had a ruptured appendix.
Oh my.
Yeah. So if I had gone on the plane, I was told I wouldn't have made it. And my mother actually came to me in a dream in the hospital. And to me, this represents the breakthrough. And she sang a beautiful song that it was made up, but the opening words I found out later were from the Bible. And it was, this is the day that God hath made. And actually in the morning, the nurse that came in said, "Rise and shine, it's a beautiful day." And my mother used to always say that to me in Chicago. So the fact that she told me this is a day was a major, major turning point for me, because I realized we only have so much time on earth. We need to spend our time wisely. We need to focus on what's most important to us. And that's when I decided I had to change my company name, Difference Makers Media. And I've been very passionate, as you can see, to help difference makers shine a light on what they're doing so they can build their impact. Because we only have so much time. Let's make the most of it.
Yes, yes. I can see the questions. Folks that are watching, if you want to raise a hand, if you have a question, we'll bring you in a few minutes. So the part you said earlier about vulnerability, um, that's a really good leadership trait. And Brene Brown writes about vulnerability. One of the conductors, the teachers of conductors, um, wrote a book and talks about you have to be vulnerable on the podium to be able to produce good music, to be an effective conductor. So there's this vulnerability thing. And I do find some leaders to say, I don't want to talk about that. It sounds like bragging, or I don't feel comfortable tooting my own horn. So what do you say to people that they shy away from? This is an essential communication that we must have with people because we're the leader, and we've with our tribe, our foundation, our nonprofit, our synagogue, our church, our mosque, we've really had impact on human lives. That's a story that's worth telling. So how do you overcome it? They might hide behind the veil of being shy, but how do you overcome that reluctance to want to share the goodness of what's happened in the work?
That's a very good thought there, Hugh. I think if people are focused on the benefits they provide others, they won't be as shy. So if I, tell you, facts, I helped the nonprofit achieve a six-figure donation from a mayor. The benefit was that they were able then to continue their program to help ex-offenders transition positively back into the environment and get jobs that made a difference in people's lives. So if you think from the perspective of benefits, then you're not bragging, because you're telling the good that you're doing and you're giving your credentials out so more people will believe in what you do. And that's important. They have to believe in you in order to contribute to you.
Hmm. Hmm. So I'm looking at my list of things that I wanted to be sure that we talked about today. So you're working with entrepreneurs. And we entrepreneurs, whether we're running a social benefit organization like a church or synagogue, or a charity, a local charity, or a foundation, or a membership organization, we're basically entrepreneurs. We're not working in a big corporate setting. So there's certain challenges in working with people like us. We got this shiny object syndrome. We're not linear. We got a thought a minute. And what's the biggest challenge you've had in working with nonprofits to get their story together? What are some of the biggest challenges? And is it because of what? Why was it a challenge?
I think many, both entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders, don't recognize that the problems they solve are really a story. So we're kind of deep in the trenches doing the work. And just like George Archibald didn't really think much of the idea that he danced with this bird and he helped her lay an egg. He didn't realize that he was solving a problem that became a really interesting story. So I would say that one of the challenges is that people don't recognize that from the problem comes a solution that becomes a story, and the story provides benefits to your audience that they can use then to make a bigger difference. Um,
So let me do a sponsor moment here, and then we'll open up for a few questions. Is that okay with you?
sure.
We have some really good people watching, and I'm sure they have some very good questions for you. Um, and three of them are experienced funding professionals and understand the importance. Ariel says, "Thank you, Lynn." the importance of getting it right. So I'm going to talk about one of our sponsors creates a virtual card for business or nonprofit leaders, and this is the virtual card for CenterVision. It's called an EZ card, letter E, letter Z, because it's EZ. And I can send a text out, and Lynn, you've seen the other side of this because you're on one of the cards here. And so they have the people that have signed up by sending a text to me have access to everything I want them to. This is sort of like a mini website people have in their hand. So it's a communication tool, and I have one set up for board members. I have one set up for volunteers, and I have one set up for people that are in different online programs. So it's a really good tool for any leader to have for their enterprise, especially for nonprofit leaders, because this thing about internal communications is real. Everybody talks about it. Nobody does anything about it. But if you're listening and you want to see our EZ card, send a text to the number 64600. Yes, it's 5 digits, 64600. And in the message, just 3 letters, LDR. It's really short for leader, LDR. And then on you'll find forum discussions. And one of our people watching today was they're making a comment today. We have the leadership podcast, which is 31 days to becoming a better leader. And there's things in there you never thought were part of leadership. And so the nonprofit exchange is where we are today. And look at here, here's Difference Makers Media. We're on today. If I clicked on there, you'd see the video of us watching us in the video. So, and then the online community is just a very important initiative that I am all about. So you can join the community with this, and then you'll get an EZ card for the particular community. So, Lynn, part of the journey you and I are on together is in the community. And actually, the exercises we're going through, if you don't mind sharing, CenterVision has this private community for leaders. And it's not only nonprofit leaders like you're demonstrating, it's people that work with nonprofit leaders or are thought leaders like yourself. So we're going through the steps of, what's the problem you solve? Why do you exist, basically? What's the impact so we're going through all those steps. Are those important components to be able to think about creating the story about your organization to share with funders?
Sure. I mean, what I was going to say is that, everything you do matters. And I love what you're doing in the nonprofit cohort group, because you're pulling all the pieces together that people need to know to make an impact. And you just asked me also a question a moment ago. I was thinking still more about it. Why don't people get more of their stories out? Beyond the fact that I think they don't realize all the good stories that are happening, I think that many times people don't want to delegate. They feel like they have to do everything themselves. The good thing about being in your group is that everyone's coming to this group from different perspectives, and we all help each other. And an important part of being successful is collaboration. So I'm building my team, learning through your group, and all the people listening here, whether you're an entrepreneur or a nonprofit leader, it doesn't matter. We have to work together. There's the old saying, team means together, everyone achieves more. And it's really true, because everyone has a different knowledge base and a different perspective. So when you gather people together, and that also means outsourcing, where you don't know everything, you can build your impact. And I love what you're doing right now too.
Well, thank you. If people want to know about the community, you can go to nonprofitleadership.online, and you can see what it's like. And our theme for this group, it was startup last time. Our theme for this group is how do we build collaborations? Because 2020 is a different animal, and 2020 is going to be a challenge. So I've opened the space for people to talk, and I see there's 2 microphones open. One of them, you were talking about books, and I usually show this book because except one time I didn't have it near me. This is a book about philanthropy, and on the cover of this book is a youth right there, Amit Banerjee, who started very young and turned out to be a really powerful leader, and now he's teaching other leaders under the tutorage of Bob Hopkins, who's here. Bob, do you have a comment or a question for our guest today?
Well, I love, 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 love what you do. And I'd love to see this book. And you're so spot on. You're singing to my heart. This book of Philanthropy Misunderstood is all about stories. It's stories that people talk about how they got involved in nonprofit work and what they did and the passion it involves. And, when people read this book, they go, you know what? These are just such great stories. Everybody needs to hear these stories. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, basically, Lynn, is that everybody needs to hear stories in order to get a sense of who they're talking to.
Exactly. The other reason, Bob, I think it's really, really important that everyone put out positive stories is we are affected by the negative media that's out there. And anything that we read or hear does affect us at the soul level. That's why I mentioned the personal story of my getting physically, upset and having 3 slip discs from being mentally so troubled. So by you sending out positive stories through your books, you're basically sending out positive vibrations that will help people in a very powerful way. I compare it to making a soup. You don't want to put so much salt in the soup that you can't eat the soup. You want to have something to dilute it to make it taste good. So I commend you, and I would also recommend you consider making some of those stories into videos, because more people are watching videos now than they're reading. So the video
Right.
and book could go hand in hand.
You just hit
And
a
we
home
are,
run there.
and we are absolutely, and we are. So thank you for saying that. Let me just tell you one real quick story. I teach college and I teach my students how to tell stories. And when you introduce yourself, you start with the story. Anyway, this one student said, "Mr. Hopkins, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I had you 3 years ago, and I just wanted to tell you a story. I interviewed for a job yesterday, and I got it. And you know why?" He said, "Because I told a story about my interest in this company, and they were so involved in my story. They said at the end of it, 'You're hired.'"
Wonderful. That's
I
great.
know it. I know. It was great for me to hear that.
Bob
That's
always has such great things to add. Thank you, Bob.
that.
We have AJ Goodwin. Bob is in Dallas, Texas. So you mentioned Tex, the bird. Um,
Yeah, she was from
so
Texas, by the way, from the San Antonio Zoo. That's why she was named Tex.
love it. So out in San Diego, somebody you know already, AJ Goodwin is on. You've opened your mic, AJ. Did you have a question or a comment for our guest today?
Yes. Thank you, Lynn. You really bring things into perspective as I've gone and told the story to thousands and hundreds of thousands of people with our legacy of music, literary, and art at Paul Lloyd Warner. And one thing that it brings me back to is that you were just saying is I even remember Mark Victor Hansen, who I've seen online and in person, shook his hands, his Chicken Soup for the Soul series, which has become a mega award winner through the world of all the great stories and the different areas that really touch the hearts of people. And that's the level that I like to play at, where it wins my heart to share with others. And I really like that you help craft and you help pull that out of us as difference makers. And I look forward to collaborating and seeing how we can, create these stories together that have been.
Oh, you disappeared. Thank you, AJ. Yes, I look forward to collaborating too. In fact, as an aside, one of the people who wrote in Chicken Soup for the Soul is Halise Bridges, who I'm going to be introducing to Hugh very soon. And Halise started an organization that I think would be of relevance to everyone listening. Originally, it was called Difference Makers International, and now it's called Blue Ribbons Worldwide, blueribbons.org. And she is focused on the power of honoring 1 billion people this year through a blue ribbon ceremony. And her story is in the Chicken Soup for the Soul, but I'm going to be interviewing her on Friday so that more people can learn how they can take what they're doing and honor those people who they care about and love, so that they can go and spread that positive message of caring and loving and honoring each other to make it a better world.
Love it. Love it. Actually, you already introduced me and we've responded already. So you may not know this, Lynn, but my 4th book is called Transforming Power. and it's not a how-to book. It's a book of stories of transformations by transformational leaders. And AJ, there's an endorsement by Mark Victor Hansen, Jack Hanfield on the back, Bob Proctor. So there were some people that I caught at CEO Space and said, "Hey, would you endorse my book?" So that's important. But they were stories of transformation. So there was a common theme with the book. So even that far back, it's not as fancy as Bob's book, but it made #2 on the Amazon list with a modest promotion. So I was pleased with that. And like you, I gave it away. The Methodist Publishing House had it. So let's go to. We got one more mic open. So thank you, Bob and AJ. Sky Houston, a world traveler. He's in California, traveling the country, but he's mobile today. Sky, where are you coming in from?
Hello, everyone. I'm proud to say that I'm coming in from Los Angeles, California right now.
Yeah. So do you have, and Sky is one of the, Bob and Jeffrey, and you met Jeffrey earlier today, Lynn, on the call we had earlier. Bob and Jeffrey and Sky are all professional funding people, especially for nonprofits. So Sky, do you have any comments or questions for our guest?
Sure, I have one quote. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Beautiful. Maya Angelou, and this goes hand in hand with alignment. This is my screensaver. This is on my background of every device that I have. And this correlates with everything that, Lynn is facilitating our discussion today, because it's just not facts and it's just not your credentials. It's not what you did or how you did it. In the end, what are you going to be remembered for? We talk about, fundraising and aligning all of the metrics, but those metrics are just a means to an end. And that end is your story, whether it be an individual, whether it be an organization. Paul Lloyd Warner, my brother from another mother, AJ, I was able to spend, 2 weeks with them in person, day by day, reorganizing it so AJ can be empowered to transition into a CEO that he is internally, that we all know. He just has to flesh out and get into a system. And that system is going to lead step by step, day by day. He has a vision board that I helped him set up. These are things that you keep in front of you. Why? Because all of us forget, what happened yesterday. But if we don't have that vision of who we really are, how we make them feel. AJ is a great example. And I've seen it with many nonprofit organizations, that all the steps and everything they do is exposing, is bringing out and fleshing out the details and capturing the audience of how you make them feel. And that's what I have to say.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you, Sky.
So thank you all. I'm going to put them back in the listening mode. So you want to comment on what Sky said?
Yes, it's so true. I mean, we remember how people made us feel or make us feel, and that's why we want to be around them. So when you can project stories that make people feel good, they're going to want to be around you. It's just as simple as that. And I love also the Margaret Mead quote about never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world, because that's really what happens. You don't need to have 100 or 1,000 people behind you. Of course, that's great if you do, but if you're committed to your vision and your dream, you can make it happen. You can pull the team together and make a change in the world and transform lives. I'm really glad that you're there for AJ, Sky, because I could tell that you're a great team together.
We saw that vision board on our call earlier, and also the storyboard for planning. So Sky left an impact. That's what leaders do. We leave. We have impact on people's lives. So thank you, Bob and Sky and AJ, for your comments and your sharing. So do you want to share another story? A story that's crafted well. We got about 10 10 minutes here. Do you want to share a story?
Of course. So I'm trying to think, which one should I pick for you? So I think I'm going to just share from my heart. This is, I mean, I have books here. I mean, I have the Dancing with textbook. I could do a little, whatever you think, Hugh.
Show that book. Show that book.
Okay, so this is a good story to share. Dancing with Tex, the remarkable friendship to save the whooping cranes. This book represents a 20-year journey. Now, I did not work on it constantly for 20 years, but I call it my journey of having faith, belief, and perseverance in my dreams. And we all have a dream. And maybe some of you listening have a book in your heart and you're going to think, well, someday I'll get that book out there. But you know, there's no day of the week called someday. There's Sunday, but not someday. So this book started as an idea when you may have heard earlier that I was interviewing George Archibald with the Crane Foundation. And I decided I wanted to write a children's book, but I hadn't written a children's book before, but it was still my dream to do so. So I started working on this project. Meanwhile, I got invited to write another book, the social justice book, which was done, and published by another publisher. The book story actually got accepted by a traditional publisher, and they ran out of funding. They had me sign an agreement. So I was, feeling badly about it, but I thought, okay, I'm going to keep trying. And I did send this story out to many different publishers. It didn't get published. So I put it away in a file. And basically, I got nudged forward because my younger son told me, why don't you just forget that story and move on? And I realized that each of us have a dream and we have to decide, are we willing to go after that dream? And I decided, my older son was at that time doing a crowdfunding project on a kayaking trip that he was taking with his best friend. And I thought, well, if my son can do crowdfunding, why don't I do that? Because I needed money to pay for the illustrator and for formatting. So I went ahead on my dream. And, it took me a while to get it all done. And I went through a journey. I picked an illustrator who wasn't the right fit. I had to stop that illustrator and find someone else. And even in the middle of this journey, you won't believe this, but the biggest, another really big obstacle happened. And it was unexpected, but that my wonderful son who had told me to, put this book aside, he was 25 at the time and he got a stroke. And I had to, stop and go to the hospital. But when we got home, I knew I could still keep working on this book. I didn't have to drop my dream. And he recovered. He got much better. He lives with us and he's doing very well. And in the meantime, I got the book published. It got to become a bestseller. I did a crowdfunding video. So if any of you want to get a copy of my crowdfunding videos, let me know. And the Illinois Conservation Foundation found out about it, read the book, and they gave me an honor of being their 2017 Conservation Author of the Year for this story. But the big picture is that we all need to have faith, belief, and perseverance. For George, it took him 6 years to dance with Tex to lay a fertile egg. For me, it was a 20-year journey, but I finally got it done, and now I'm ready to get out more stories.
That's an inspiration. We had Mr. Rash from Virginia down the road here had some internet problems. He's back, and he had Mr. Rash. So we don't deal in politics or religion, but it's fascinating that we have Christian, Muslim, and Jew talking about elements of faith and how we have a common God. So I rejoice in that. So Mr. Rash, you have a comment or question?
Yes, sir.
Guy? Yeah, you're good. You
Well,
sound
yeah,
good.
First of all, you got two Jews here. So my grandmother and my grandfathers on both sides were heavily Jewish. Anyway, so thank you, Lynn, for being here today, and I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I have to rush. I had a strange day. It was I'll tell my story very quickly. I had to spend my birthday at the dentist, and then with the internet guys, and then on another call, and then this. So it's a full day. My question is this, and I actually just signed up on your site, and we can discuss this some other time. But my organization works around the world, Legacy International, and we do many things. We do entrepreneurial training. We do tech women. We do women's empowerment. We do public health work. And so we have many stories.
Mhm.
And so the question is, how do you tell many stories around a single mission? Our mission is basically universal values and empowerment of people through their own cultural and values and social values. And we do very specific types of training in many fields. If you look at our website, which I put up, you'd see. So we have many stories from each rubric, but and if you just tell your mission story, it really doesn't convey. And the other thing is, I've always believed that the best story about you is told by other people. So the people we've served for 40 years.
Right. So in answer to your question, you have good questions. There's I'd say two different ways around that. One is you can create a series of videos, short videos. You know, people don't have long attention spans.
Exactly.
So you may want to consider that and breaking down. You mentioned the different categories of the way that you empower people. Just like Chicken Soup for the Soul has different editions, you may want to have different videos that focus on the different aspects of the good that you do in the world. Another way of making it short and sweet is doing a montage. So it won't be going into depth, but you can do a little bit of all the different good things that you're doing into one video. I'm thinking almost like a preview trailer. Like when you go see a movie, you get to see the previews. I did a series of videos for Alexian Brothers healthcare system, and they started out with an idea of 2 videos, which grew into 4 and then 5 videos after our meeting, because they had different audiences they wanted to address. And so we ended up doing different videos with some.
Yeah.
I hope that helps you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, we do videos, and yeah, and you're right. People's attention span is very small. And then of course we try to tweak it to the interest of the person we're working on. One of previous person on Cinevision on this podcast was a gentleman who was a philanthropist who talked about, if people don't take the time to know what I'm interested in, I'm not interested in them. Basically, is what he was saying. So we also like to tweak things. But yes, it's very helpful, and perhaps we can talk further on this at another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ahmed, I understand there's a birthday happening. Does that happen to be yours?
Yes, it happens to be mine. Don't ask me any questions and don't do any math.
I won't. Well, I'm sure I'm older. All right. Thank you for that.
Oh, question. You're not older than I am. No, you're not. You're younger than I am.
Okay. All righty. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're my younger brother.
Thank you. So Legacy International's down the road in Bedford, and he's been doing amazing work for 40 years. And we share a common love of coffee, good coffee. So Lynn, this has been so inspirational and so informative. I want to do one more little commercial moment, and then I would like to throw it back to you for a closing thought that you might have. What do you want to challenge people with? What do you want them to do? How do you want to close this out as having people step up to their potential they didn't know they had before they heard you? We have several sponsors that enable us to do the work of Cinevision Leadership Foundation, but we're going to promote our own community today. It is not open every month. It is not open every day. It is only open occasionally. It's open right now. If you're listening to this today, watching on Facebook, it's the 1st of December in 2020. And we're part of a great historical event. So we will be out of this one into normalcy, or maybe new radical pretty soon. So we stay connected in the online community, and we're promoting collaborations, networks of nonprofits where you are, or business and nonprofit leader collaboration, because it's good for business and it's sure helpful with a nonprofit. So check it out, and check it out now before it closes up. It's open now until the 7th of December, and it's nonprofitleadership.online, nonprofitleadership.online, because it's really about leadership. So Lynn, thank you for the kind words you had earlier to say about the community you're in. And we've been very tasked with a small group of people who are doing amazing work, and the connections like you just shared with AJ. And, you know, we had one of my Christian sisters here actually attended your synagogue service at your invitation sometimes. So there's just this great congeniality that happens when we're working together for the common good. So thank you for your inspiration, and you're always so helpful to connect me and other people. So, and to share some of your wisdom today, because you've got a lot more. What do you want to leave people with after giving us so many tidbits? What's your parting thought for people?
Thank you. I want everyone to remember that you have greatness within you and that you do make a difference. Whether it's a smile or a kind word or sharing your story with someone, we all make a difference. And the big part of this is that we get to choose what kind of difference we want to make. You can choose the outcome of your story. No matter what happens to you in your life, you can choose to make something positive from it and share your positivity with others. So I want you to remember that you make a difference and that I believe in you. And go forward with your dreams, because you never know whose life you're going to touch.
Lynn Sanders, Story Guide. Thank you for sharing your wisdom on the nonprofit exchange.
Thank you. It's great being here.